tonight, we have a lovely hour ahead of us in the company of two exquisite writers, Kanishk Tharoor and Marie-Helene Bertino. Both will read from the story collections, then answer some questions from me, then we'll round off the evening with an audience Q&A. So please do think of some questions over the next 40 minutes or so. I'm Thomas Morris. I'm a short story writer, an editor for Sting and Fly magazine, and this year I'm a writing resident at UCC. It's a great honour to be here with these two wonderful writers, whose brilliant collections have been such good company these last few weeks. I sent an email to the two of them a few days ago saying I'm actively excited to interview them. And I'll confess to you all, that's not often the feeling I have when I'm in one of these events. These are two writers who, whilst they write very different stories to one another, share some key qualities. Obviously, they're both exceptional practitioners of short story form. They both possess insatiable imaginations, something which is actually strangely quite rare in writers. Both are gifted with a deftness and a lightness of touch, a comic wryness. Both have an unrelenting curiosity in people all makes them tick. And both are writers who dare to write stories where things happen, extraordinary events take place. For example, Kanishk is a story about a man who has to guide an elephant all the way from India to Morocco, whilst Marie has a story about a woman who decides to take Bob Dylan to a strange family Thanksgiving dinner. In both of the works, you find yourself at the mercy of that fundamental short storytelling pleasure. You're left holding your breath, wondering what the hell is going to happen next. And finally, both these writers are, I think you'd agree, exceptionally, annoyingly good-looking people.
You also found yourself.
I didn't tell him to say that, but that's okay. I did, right, yeah. I couldn't decide if I wanted to read first, so I'm going to toss a coin. If it's heads, you'll be reading first. If it's tails, it's heads. So Marie will be reading first. But let me introduce our readers for tonight. Marie-Helene Bertino is an O. Henry Prize winning, Pushcart Prize winning, Iowa Short Fiction Award winning writer from Philadelphia who now lives in Brooklyn. She's the author of the hugely lauded novel 2 AM at CAT'S PAJAMAS and the wonderful story collection Safest Houses. She teaches fiction at NYU and at the low-residency MFA program at the Institute for American and Indian Arts. And this year, she's the International Francophone Short Story Fellow here at the Munster Literature Centre. As part of her fellowship, she's also teaching at UCC. Safest Houses is a very special collection of stories. Here is a bold, smart, wise writer whose stories simmer and boil and then overflow with the chaos and beauty of being alive. Her stories are simultaneously sad, tender, lovely, poignant, and hilarious, and the work often moves between these feelings within the space of a few sentences. I did have quotes here, but she's going to be reading that story, so I don't want to spoil the punchline. The narrators are often breathless, charming, wisecracking, astute observers of the people and the spaces around them. They're often in some kind of pain, experiencing a kind of alienation that can only be properly articulated through the stories they're telling us. Through their eyes, the world for us is tilted askew, and the familiar is made strange, and the strange is made familiar. And here's a writer unafraid to escalate the story, to take a story to places you would never imagine, to wave goodbye to traditional realism in order to best express emotional truth, psychological realism. Reading her stories can feel like you're watching from afar, your friends or family playing escaping on a frozen lake. You watched, and at first you're amazed by the sight. Then watching closer, you find yourself dazzled by the elegance of the shapes they're making, shapes you never expected them to make. And then suddenly, you find yourself utterly gripped by a fear that the ice might crack. That at any moment, the ice might break, and your friend, or your sister, or your mother might fall through the ice. This is a tremendous collection, and Bertino's a dazzling writer, and it's with great pleasure I ask her to read to us this evening.
Thank you so much. Tom, thank you. That was so beautiful. I don't think it's possible for me to read anything more beautiful than that introduction was. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted and flattered. This story is called Sometimes You Break Their Hearts, Sometimes They Break Yours. I am like everyone else, good at some things, bad at others. I am good at eating clementines. I am bad at drawing straight lines. I am good at drinking coffee. I would be bad at building a house. If someone asked me to build them a house, I would have to say no. Or I would say yes and worry they would not like the house I built. Why is the kitchen made of coffee filters, they'd say, and why are there no floors? And I'd say, I wish you hadn't asked me to build you a house. I am bad at telling stories. For example, this one is about Christmas lights, and here's the first time I'm mentioning them. A person who knew how to tell a story would start with, this is a story about Christmas lights I finally got around to putting up last night and the miracle that happened afterward. You know how it is at a party when someone tells an absolute gripper that juggles different characters and lands on a memorable line, and everyone holds their stomachs and looks at each other in shocked amazement, a line people repeat on car rides home so they can laugh again? I am not that person. I am the one asking the host what kind of cheese it is I'm eating. The name of the planet I'm from does not have an English equivalent. Roughly, it sounds like a cricket hopping onto a plate of rice. I am here to take notes on human beings. I fax them back to my superiors. We have fax machines on planet Cricket Rice. They are quaint, retro things, like vintage ice cube trays. Human beings, I fax, produce water in their eyes when they are sad, happy, or sometimes just frustrated. Water. I work as a receptionist for Landry Business Solutions. I have no idea what we do. When people ask, I say, when businesses have problems, we have solutions. And if they press me, I say it involves outsourcing. A monkey could do my job better, and with more hilarious results. I answer the phone, keep the candy jar filled, and monitor the bathroom key. 10 minutes out of my 20-minute training were candy jar related, and the other 10 consisted of bathroom key shakedown tactics. People are always losing the bathroom key, and the receptionist before me must have gotten frustrated because she hot glued it to a 12-inch ruler. I have no friends at Landry Business Solutions. I assume they are too busy outsourcing and thinking of solutions. They don't bother me, and unless they receive a FedEx package, I don't bother them. Human beings, I fax, fetishize no organ more than the heart. When they like someone, they say, there's a girl after my own heart. They will stand or sit very close to the person they love with their heart. And when they're sad, they say, my heart is broken. They will tell large groups of people things they don't believe. But the heart is just a muscle with an important job. It's just an area in the body. I am bad at asking for help. When you ask a human being for help, there's a chance they will say later, remember when you asked for help? Can I have $5? That goes for medicine too. I don't like asking help from pills in a bottle. I don't want to be woken up at night by a tab of aspirin asking to borrow $5. There's a reason it's called alien-aided. Because I am an alien, I am alone. When you are alone, there is no one to tell, there is a bird whose call sounds like hoo, 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 hoo. Or there's a spider landing on your head. So you have to tell yourself, there's a spider landing on my head. I should move. A week ago, my mother and I were chopping peppers, and she said, let them be big enough so each one is its own mouthful. I don't like when she says words like mouthful, words that cannot be divorced from sex. Other words like that are suck, fingerhole, cock, rim, pound cake, creamy, rimshaw, flaccid, balls, vagina, moist, epidermis, radiator, and the name Angus. I asked her, please don't say mouthful anymore. And she hopped up and down with a knife in her hand, singing, mouthful, mouthful. And when I got home, the Christmas lights snarled at me from their ball on the couch. I ate a mouthful of ice cream and wondered how appliances can be programmed to turn themselves on. If a coffee maker can turn itself on, doesn't that mean it is never truly off? Human beings, I facts, spend their lives pretending their parents are people with no needs. They do not want their moms to talk about sex or die. Human beings, I facts, did not think their lives were challenging enough, so they invented roller coasters. A roller coaster is a series of problems on a steel track. And then upon encountering real problems, human beings compare their lives to riding a roller coaster, even though they invented roller coasters to have fun things to do on their day off. As a child on planet Cricket Rice, I lay in bed trying to figure out a way I could know everyone on planet Earth. America was easy. I could drive through it. But then I would send a letter to one person in every country, and they could tell their friends, and I could know everyone by association. But language was a problem, and I didn't know every country's name, and I used to get panicky and red-eyed about it. I have other responsibilities at my job. I seat clients who have problems and are waiting for solutions. But sometimes the person with solutions is late. When people are late to meet me, I assume it's because they lost track of time while planning my surprise birthday party. I worry, will they remember I like chocolate on chocolate? But most human beings don't like when other people are late. They get frowny-faced and huffy, so I entertain the clients who wait for solutions. I make the candy jar talk, or I tell them I have a friend who has vintage ice cube trays. You pull a silver crank to release the cubes. I say, would you like to own vintage ice cube trays? And normally they say yes, because when they are waiting, human beings can be very participatory. And then I say, not me, I don't need getting ice to be a charming experience. And I pretend to be very anti-vintage ice cube tray. And in this way, I yank the tablecloth out from under the bottle of wine and the candle of the conversation. If you met me, you'd wonder why I do not look like aliens you've seen on TV. Why aren't you green, you'd say. Why isn't your head overlarge? And to answer that, I offer this. Landry Business Solutions had a Halloween costume party, and Tammy came dressed for like a regular day at work. She said, I am a serial killer. We look just like everyone else. When you are alone, you are in the right place to watch sadness approach like storm clouds over an open field. You can sit in a chair and get ready for it. And as it moves through you, you can reach out your hands and feel all the edges. When it passes and you can drink coffee again, you even miss it because it has been loyal to you like a boyfriend. If you need it to be about a boy, I'll give you a boy. In a gas station at the end of the day, the owner or the teenager he pays counts the drawer, fills the cigarette machine, and flips the closed sign. My ex was the closed sign. On that gas station or any store that closes. He used to make fun of me for answering questions with metaphors. He'd say, how was your day? And I'd say, if my day were a bug, I would crush it. He wanted me to say my day was fine. He's dead now. And by dead, I mean dating a stripper. Strippers are girls who can say my day was fine. Also, they're very good with money. My exes do well after me. I'm like a lucky penny. Cars, I facts, are not attached to anything. They are free to collide with other bodies whenever they want and wreck each other. But this would not happen with my bumper car system. Cars would be attached to poles linked to an overarching mechanism as they are in bumper cars. The worst that can happen in a bumper car is you make a strange face when you smash someone. A strange face that makes the other person think that you are uglier than they thought you were, and that maybe there are other ugly things they don't know about you. But they forget in the next second when they are smashed by someone else. It doesn't hurt, though, as much as real cars. It doesn't hurt as much. Here's the thing about human beings. Sometimes you smash their cars, sometimes they smash yours. One time I got my nails done, and the girl held my hand so softly I wondered if she knew me. She commented on the loveliness of my cuticles, and she didn't have to. She went out of her way. Human beings don't like to go out of their ways. And I said, I hope nothing bad ever happens to you. 5 days ago, the bathroom key went missing, and Landry Business Solutions has a PA, and I made an announcement over it. Why we have a PA is beyond me, since only 12 people work here and they sit in one room. I could have easily walked into that room and made a medium-volumed inquiry, but I don't like to leave my desk. My announcement over the PA was this: will whoever has the bathroom key please return it? 3 hours later, Delilah slammed the key on my desk. The door had gotten stuck, and she had been trapped in the bathroom for hours. No one heard her yelling. She missed a meeting, and still no one thought to look for her. She heard my announcement in the bathroom where she sat, hating me. Someone from another office finally heard her screams and climbed through a heating duct to free her. Delilah, disoriented, left early. It's a bad day when you realize how unimportant you are. It would be easier if it were a boy. Then I could say to Tammy or Grace at work, I feel lonely because of a boy. And they could say, men are like trains. There's one every 5 minutes. But if I say, I am an alien taking notes on human beings to fax to my superiors, they would have no arsenal of information from which to draw. They would not know what to say at all. It's not a boy, or a job, or a family, or a house. It's the world. There are so many people in it. This is the part with the Christmas lights and the miracle. Yesterday, I stopped to collect a heads-up penny and was late for the train to work. I walked fast to catch it. People who walk fast look weird, and every time I'm walking fast, I think how weird I must look. I still missed the train. The doors laughed at me. But trains are like men. There's one every 5 minutes, so I got the next one. I wasn't that late, and good Lord, no one noticed anyway. But the candy jar was empty, and I couldn't get to the store until noon, and I smiled at Delilah, and she didn't smile back. The day was a slippery rock I couldn't climb. Walking home, I heard a couple arguing, and even though he was insisting, I knew it was the end. Then I saw 2 people in wheelchairs. You're not allowed to feel bad about anything when you are around people in wheelchairs, which is why I don't like people in wheelchairs. You can say, sometimes at night I wake up and my throat is filled with loneliness and I am choking. And they will say, I'm in a wheelchair, and they will win. They are the human pain equivalent of a royal flush. Then I remembered that morning I had collected a heads-up penny and nothing lucky had happened to me. I felt swindled, behind in the count. It was one of those days. I got home and there were still the Christmas lights to hang, and it was time. It was not time to check how much sugar I had. It was not time to say the word rose over and over until I forgot what it meant. It was no time other than the time it was to hang the lights. So I got a ladder and a staple gun and climbed to the roof of the house I could not be trusted to build. And I hadn't asked anyone the proper way to hang lights, of course, so I crawled around stapling haphazardly to the shingles. Not a line, but words. 2 words to let my superiors know I was finished taking notes, to come and get me in their glorious spaceships. And when I was done, I climbed down and checked my work. In lights, I had stapled, help me. I figured it was best to err on the side of honesty. I did not learn that on earth, dear God, but I learned it. I ate a forkful of cold noodles and went to bed. At 3 a.m., a commotion on my front lawn woke me. It sounded like an army of washing machines in their final cycles had congregated outside my window. My bed hummed. I looked out. Beams of ambitious light jackknifed through the yard. Aggressive angel light, light that somersaulted and looked like sound. Red lights and white lights. They were cars. More cars than I could count. The first ones pulled onto my lawn so the others would have room to park behind them. They held human beings who disembarked holding baskets with cloth over them. I recognized my mother, the manicurist, my ex, the stripper he dates, Delilah. People filled my street and the street next to it, and the cars were still coming. I could see headlights for miles. They were still coming. I was down on my knees. One human being cannot withstand the force of that much kindness. Do you know what I mean?
This is on still, yes. Thank you for reading. Our next and final reader of the night is Kanishk Tharoor. Befitting the transnational scope of this wondrous story collection, Swim Among the Stars, Kanishk is an Indian citizen who was born in Singapore, spent time as a toddler in Geneva, went to preschool in Calcutta, and has lived in New York since '86. He's a winner of numerous awards, including the Tata Hexa Literature Live First Book Author Fiction. He was nominated for the National Magazine Award for The Tale of Teahouse, a brilliant and unforgettable story that features in this collection. As well as a fiction writer, he's a journalist whose work has been published in the New York Times and The Guardian. He's also a broadcaster. His 10-part BBC radio series, Museum of Lost Objects, explored cultural destruction in the Middle East. Swimmer Among the Stars is a sensational story collection. These are stories where each story is packed with sort of story and further stories, like a kind of narrative Russian doll. And the further he takes us in, the deeper we encounter profound questions about culture and conflict, power and privilege, language and communication, and the trouble thereof. Indeed, he's a natural storyteller who delights in the making and shaping of stories, and yet his work seems to continually question the very function of stories. He shows you one story and slowly twists it, turns it, rotates it, till a whole host of other narratives are revealed, which ultimately change the story's complexion and deepen the mystery of what we're being shown. And all the while, he has an uncanny ability to find in every scene the smallest and loveliest of human detail that brings a vibrant colour to every page. The stories themselves are filled with adventures, perilous journeys and exile. They follow the fate of invaders and armies and the diplomats who go into space. And presently and timelessly, records the progress of refugees who flee their homes, of soldiers who after financial necessity leave their families to go to war. One comes away from the book realizing that the world is teeming with story, that everything, every object, every animal, every person, every culture has a lineage, a history, a secret life of its own. He has a masterly handle on time and space, and in few lines he can sweep you through hundreds and thousands of years across continents and cultures and languages. And yet he seems as comfortable describing the intricacies of a battle in 190 BC as he is in describing a Skype conversation, or the way digital age journalists sensationalize stories with clickbait on Twitter. As a reader, it's a sheer pleasure to be in company of a writer who is able to cast a cool, sharp, witty eye over the desires, some great, some petty, that have driven us through the ages and continue to drive us now. Here then is a writer with a love of people and love of the stories and histories that connect them. This collection is a head-spinning joy from start to finish, and so with a great delight I ask Kanishk Tharoor to read to us this evening.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that really generous and kind introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here in Cork. It's my first time in Ireland, and I wish I was here for longer. This is a really beautiful festival, and so thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much as well for being here fairly late in the night to hear us read. I'm going to read from sections of two different stories. The first is a story called Elephant at Sea. Can you all hear me? Is the mic working? Yeah. Which is based on a real thing that happened that was told to me when I was young about when the Princess of Morocco asked the Indian ambassador of Morocco at the time in the 50s for an elephant, and he was perplexed, but he accepted. And knowing the speed of Indian bureaucracy, about 6 years after the request was made, an elephant was dispatched to Morocco. And anyway, by the time it arrived, the princess was studying sociology in Paris and had completely forgotten about making this request for an elephant. Anyway, the story stuck with me, and what happened to the elephant stuck with me, and I wanted to make a story out of it. And I had visited Morocco, traveled there a bit, and so it came back to me then. And I wrote the story, and I just wanted to say, as kind of to share a funny thing that happened to me, that when this book was launched in India, at my book launch in Delhi, I had the completely uncanny experience of the daughter of the Indian ambassador to Morocco at the time being at the book launch, having read this story, and then telling me that the way I described The princess, who was a friend of hers apparently, her father, the ambassador, who I never met and didn't even know his name, was completely accurate. That I depicted this world in a way that was really real and intimate to her. And that, to me, was sort of the first kind of really strange, powerful way where I discovered how, as a fiction writer, sometimes you can take something completely out of your imagination and yet have it come back to you in the real world. And, I mean, obviously, it doesn't always happen in that exact way, but it's a power that fiction does have. And so it was, anyway, let me just read from the beginning of the story, and then I'll move on. It's Elephant at Sea. In the late summer of 1979, the second secretary of the Indian Embassy to Morocco received a cable that uprooted his considerable years of training and left him floundering. The message read simply, "Elephant en route." Was it some sort of code? Further investigation only deepened his confusion. The cable had come from the customs office in Cochin, a port in the south of India. No, the customs officials reported back to him, it wasn't code, it was an elephant. An elephant that, along with its mahout, its driver, was now very much headed by ship to Casablanca. The second secretary probed, why send an elephant? Here at the customs office, the reply came, we handle only the movement of goods. For the movement of reasons, please refer your inquiry to the Ministry of External Affairs. The second secretary telegrammed his colleagues in the ministry in Delhi. With telegrams to the ministry, it was important first to be terse, so that you were considered economical, and second, to be sharp, so that in the midst of reams of communication from outposts around the world, your message would be noticed. Why ship elephant? Stop. Embassy already has cars. Stop. No one in the ministry seemed to know anything about the elephant. A flummoxed telegram returned to the embassy. What elephant? Stop. Is this code? Stop. Embarrassed, the second secretary finally consulted the ambassador, who knew through long years of experience that it was pointless to question the whims of the capital. Marvelous, the ambassador said, smoothing his mustache. An elephant, just what we need. And they couldn't even send it to us. No, they're sending it to Casablanca. You have to arrange for the thing to be met and picked up. He sprayed himself with cologne and mused, if an elephant can even be picked up. That night, the second secretary swam awake in his bed, resenting the sheets, resenting the pillow, resenting the indifference of his work, resenting Arabic for its impossible secret throatiness, and resenting with what little business was left to him the unknown buffoon who would make diplomacy out of elephants. The buffoon was not, as he imagined, some self-satisfied civil servant in South Block, but the Princess of Morocco. Explanation arrived via telex from a friend in the ministry who owed him a few favors, and so mustered the initiative to ask around. The story of the elephant began 6 years earlier in the same Indian embassy in Rabat. At one of those habitual functions whose purpose seems so obvious in the preparation, but disappears in the operation, the little Moroccan princess had come to the embassy and frozen before a picture of an elephant. It was among the many stock images, all approved by the Ministry of Tourism, that lined the lobby of the embassy. Dawn over the Himalayan ranges, houseboats on the backwaters, the Taj Mahal rosy in its cushion of smog, a bright tractor devastating a field of wheat. The princess only had eyes for the elephant. Her wordless arm extended towards the picture, pointing. C'est un éléphant, said the embassy official tasked with escorting the princess. She remained transfixed. Vous aimez les éléphants? The unlucky man suggested. It seemed the princess did love elephants because she wouldn't move. The official, who had, in previous posts, offered counsel on trade policy with Indonesia and arms deals with the Soviet Union, looked around for help before lowering himself to her level. Mademoiselle, vous voulez un éléphant? He asked, with the desperation stoked in him by all children, never mind the Princess of Morocco. She turned, smiled, and gave him the smallest gift of a nod. It was enough. The official eventually spoke to the then ambassador, who put in the request to Delhi, recommending the delivery of an elephant to satisfy the princess and to strengthen a bilateral friendship. The request passed through the appropriate channels at the usual speeds. 6 years later, the creature was irrevocably on its way. The second secretary received updates about the elephant's progress from various consular staff. In Aden, it posted for photographs in front of the oldest coffee house. It bumped a football back and forth with boys on the beach in Alexandria. In Algiers, veterans of the war against the French held a reception in its honor. The Indian elephant was, in their words, a symbol of the ancient wisdom of a civilization that had inspired the global struggle against Western imperialism. After it passed through Gibraltar, the Second Secretary got an excited telegram from the British Naval High Command. Brilliant! Stop! Top pachyderm! Stop! The Moroccans were less enthused. What are we to do with it, they said. Casablanca Zoo has enough African elephants, and there's no space for an Indian one. The Second Secretary protested. It's for the princess, he reminded them. She asked for it. Well, she may have, the Moroccan said, but she's away studying sociology in Paris now. And has no interest in elephants. So you might have to take the thing back. Only the Indian ambassador's persistence at a cocktail party won their grudging cooperation. It was agreed that the elephant would be specially housed in a portion of the royal gardens in Rabat. How it would get to Rabat was another matter. The Moroccans insisted they had no trucks big enough to carry the creature between the two cities. This was a time of war, and their heaviest military vehicles were all rumbling around the south. Worse, thanks to the mischief of Polisario terrorists, the single rail line between Casablanca and the capital was broken. But these inconveniences, the Moroccans claimed, shouldn't be a problem. After all, the elephant is its own means of transportation. The Second Secretary was sent to Casablanca to escort the elephant back to Rabat. It took some time to find an appropriate launch in which to ferry the creature to port. When it finally disembarked, the small police band awaiting its arrival had grown sour in the heat. They rushed the welcoming ditty and swiftly packed away their trombones. The reporters also sped through their work. They found the mahout altogether too clothed. As he perched on the elephant's back, they had him remove his shirt and roll up his trousers to look more convincing for the cameras, all knobby knees and gleaming skin. Instead of asking the mahout questions about the elephant, they surrounded the Second Secretary. He was wearing a suit. We are proud to share the joy of elephants with the people of Morocco, he said. The hathi belongs to all nations. Belongs to not to one nation, but to all. What little the Second Secretary knew about elephants came from an urban childhood of zoos and encyclopedias. As a measure of their robust memories, elephants hold grudges and harbor very finely developed notions of revenge. Elephants have sensitive feet, capable of feeling through the earth from long distances away the approaches of other elephants, or of rainstorms, or of bulldozers. Studies have shown that they can recognize their own reflections, suggesting that, however rudimentary, there may exist among elephants an amorphous theory of mind. In some, these scraps formed an altogether surreal idea of the elephant, one incommensurate with the full being in front of him, dabbled with cooling splashes of mud, blinking restlessly and curling its trunk around the legs of its driver. The Mahutsa supplied more practical information. In its present ship-weary condition, the elephant could walk at most 40 kilometers in a day, in a single stretch, probably no more than 25. How far is it to the capital, he asked. He spoke no Hindi, and the Second Secretary spoke no Malayalam, so they talked in a manner of English. A little more than 90 kilometers to Rabat, the Second Secretary said. Hoisting himself onto the elephant, the Mahout surveyed the road leading out from the docks through the flat outskirts of Casablanca. For all the immensity of this unknown continent, the world always seemed more manageable from the back of an elephant. He smiled at the Second Secretary. 90 of their Moroccan kilometers, or 90 of ours? What are you talking about, the Second Secretary said. There's no difference. The Mahout shook his head. You and I may not be able to tell the difference, but the elephant can. So I'm going to read from one sections from another story called Swimmer Among the Stars, which allowed me to explore my interest in the problem of language extinction, which I don't know if many of you are particularly aware of. We live in a sort of unprecedented time of the death of languages. And paradoxically, even though I live in New York City is actually a sort of laboratory of dying languages. Over 800 languages are spoken in New York. And many of them are languages that are spoken in diaspora by people whose, by communities of immigrants. And so there are languages spoken in New York that are no longer spoken in the hill tracts of Bangladesh, or in Kenya, or in Indonesia, but survive in New York City. And so there, I have friends who are linguists who explore the nooks and crannies of the city, looking for dying languages. In any case, that knowing these people provoked my interest in the subject, and so I wrote this story, from which I will read the beginning. As a rule, the last speaker of a language no longer uses it. Ethnographers show up at the door with digital recorders, ready to archive every declension, each instance of the genitive, the idiosyncratic function of verbal suffixes. But this display hardly counts as normal speech. It simply confirms reality to the last speaker, that the old world of her mind is cut adrift from humans and can only be pulped into a computer. She finds it strange to listen to the sounds of her mouth. Inevitably, she mingles a more common language with her own. That common language, after all, is the speech that now keeps her company, that leads her through the market, that sits with her in the evenings by the television, that gives her the terminal diagnosis at the clinic, that pours through her letterbox, that comes in a crisp nurse's outfit to wash her feet. Her own language does nothing of the sort. It is nowhere to be found. She pauses, silent now, staring incredulously at the microphone. How am I the last speaker of my language? How can I be its keeper? My language left me. She apologizes to the ethnographers. You must understand, she says, that though my memory is preserved better than a lemon, it is still difficult to remember which words are my own and which words are not. Please speak as it comes naturally to you, the ethnographers say. Thank you, I'll try. In any case, we can help you remember. The last speaker looks up, puzzled. But if you know already, then why do you want to hear it from me? It means something more if it comes from you. Do you speak my language then? Do you understand me when I say this, when I say that? And even now when I'm singing this song that my father sang every day as he disappeared down the valley. She sings and her alien words crackle about the room. No, we do not understand, ethnographers say, or if we do, it is only distantly. Oh, that is a shame. It would be nice to sing this song for someone. Please, madam, sing it for the microphone. She grins, so the microphone understands, does it? Yes, it understands. If only you could get microphones to talk. She laughs and then she feels a little sorry for herself. She does not mean to sound sardonic. No one could accuse her of being indifferent to her plight. Some years before, it had occurred to her that she was no longer in the habit of hearing her own tongue. Everybody in the town seemed to be speaking the common language. She did not mind using the their language, since she had dwelt in it for a long time, almost as long as she could remember, and had kept it clean and given it a good airing, rearranged the furniture so it suited her just right. It was the language of her husband and her children, and she had made it hers. But always in the darker corners she placed mementos of her own, a proverb, a snatch of rhyme, some light daily expressions, the glimpse of which would startle her family. With nobody to speak her language to, she began talking with objects, the pots and pans, the creaking door, the sharp corners of a table. She never spoke it with animals because, and here a foreign kind of pride sparked within her, it was never a language to waste on goats. Once, on a rare visit, her son came upon her in the living room, speaking with a teacup. He told her she was going mad. No, she sighed, you don't understand. This is what a conversation sounds like. Would you like a cup of tea? The last speaker asked the ethnographers. They would. Let's have some tea and then I'll sing for you. She rises from her seat and waits as they shift their equipment, the light stand and camera, the microphones, the attendant knots of wires. Brushing away their offers to assist her, she lights the stove with a match and stares out through the kitchen window. Poplars nod in the breeze over the mustard field. Someone's boy is loitering at the front gate, his hands in the pockets of his jeans. At each half step, his sneakers light up red. She thinks he must be there to look at the visitors, but she is wrong. He follows her movements with open curiosity, as if there was something surprising about the way a kettle boils. She smiles. That's the matter with strange guests. They turn you into a stranger as well. The tea warms her voice. When she sings, her eyes close and her chin with its gentle down of hair thrusts forward into the lamplight. The ethnographers cannot help but admire her strong set of teeth, a rare sight in so much of their work. They're used to thinking that there is half a relationship between dental health and endangered languages. Languages, like people, become toothless. In her case, of course, a full mouth of teeth won't make any difference. She is the last, the very last. After her, the language has only a ghostly future. Few even remember the time when its clambering rhythms united the valley and the uplands. Clinically speaking, it is already dead. A language cannot be alive if it exists alone in the mind of an old woman, no matter how fine her teeth. I'll stop there, and then we can...
It just struck me the strange parallels between your second story there and Marie-Helene, that idea of that loneliness and people feeling like there's no one else to have the conversation with. That's not what my question's going to be about. I was just wondering, when you both sat down to write those stories, how much of what did you know was going to happen? Did you know from the start this is where the story's going to go, and how much did you discover along the way? And perhaps you can give us an insight into how long these stories took to write.
I find that I do my... Is this mic on? I find that I do my best thinking as I write. So, in very rare cases do I map out a short story. I'm working on a novel now, which is slightly more intentional, and I have a sort of scaffold that I have to make an outline to write into. But with the short stories, I think one of the great pleasures of the experience of writing a short story is that it gives you a kind of freedom to move around, to make drastic changes as you go. So often, I'll have an idea, a conceit, or I'll have an image, or I'll have a line, and then the project of the short story becomes a kind of explanation of that image, or a way to arrive at that line, or a way to arrive at that image. And I think, it's an immensely pleasurable experience, I find, because it's almost like you're solving a puzzle for yourself. And that's one of the things that I love about short stories, at least writing short stories. In terms of how long it took me to put this together, I mean, it was sort of accumulated over time. There's a story here that was written when I was 18 and somehow still made it in. And the stories that were written in my 30s. So it's sort of the accumulation of the stories that I think are very much linked in thematically, but do sprinkle in different time periods of my life.
I too write toward what I've heard you say, Tom, the unknowing. At the same time, and I would only feel brave enough to say this because I've heard Amy Hempel, who is a short story writer I admire greatly, say it too, which is that I normally know the title and the last line when I begin to write. And I'm also conscious that I have a couple students in the audience, and I'm directly contradicting something I told them as early as this morning. But I normally I can hear the last line and I'm kind of writing toward it, but I have no idea what's going to happen. And this story, Sometimes You Break Their Hearts, came out whole almost because I had been mulling it over and kind of singing it to myself, I think for months before I wrote it down. So when I wrote it down, it tricked me into thinking it was whole, but I had actually been thinking of it for a very long time.
And I think the stories you read today are they're kind of nice representatives of the collection, especially formally, because as I noticed in your collection, Marie, there's 8 stories, 7 of them are first person, and then you have 1 in third person, and yourself, all but one of your stories are in third person.
Is there anyone in first person?
There is, yeah, it's the, I should... Yeah, no. There's a cultural...
Oh, yes.
And I'm just wondering what draws both of you to writing in third person or first person?
Now I feel very called out.
No.
I like first person. The challenges of first person would be how close and honest and brutally raw can you actually get when it's the person themselves telling the story. And so the challenge for myself for first person is how can I go as far as I possibly can with first person and admit, as George Saunders says, how can I love the character more? So love them enough to be completely honest about their flaws. How close can I get to them? So that would be the challenge to first. And so I like it because I like the voice and I like the power that I find in it. I'm just naturally drawn to that kind of capability. And then I am constantly challenging myself to find new ways of being honest about the human who is speaking for themselves. But my novel's in third, so I do have that.
Yeah, I love writing in third person. And when I write in first person, it's more like an experiment. I think of third person, I think also I read a lot of pre-modern literature. That is to say, things, everything from medieval poetry to epics to collections of folklore. And there's something about that kind of old mode of storytelling that I've always found quite captivating. And, I like to think that these stories are kind of flecked by the firelight of the storyteller. I like the at once sort of sweeping and irreverent voice of the third person folklorist. I like the way certain kinds of third person can cut against the grand scope of a story. I like the sort of cavalier treatment of the emphasis on intimacy rather than psychology that comes often with the third person. Those are all the qualities of the third person that have always appealed to me, and that I think why I tend to write in third person. It also so happens I think most of the literature that I love is in third person. So I may just also be parroting that. But yeah, it's a challenge of its own to make a third person narrator at once intimate and yet confident authorial.
At the start, I read out a list of similarities between your work. You also have a personal similarity in that you're both married to poets. Which I think if you're a short story writer, the general advice is marry someone who's going to make money. Marrying a poet. Yeah. Do you share your work with your husbands and wives, and do you get feedback from them?
I do. The most frustrating thing about my particular poet husband is that he can read a poem's worth of one of my stories and diagnose it immediately. So he reads, a stanza and will say, I think that the character is, and I'm like, you couldn't possibly know that by only reading that short. And the most frustrating part is that he's always right. So we do share work, and I don't know if you would agree, but I don't find the mediums to be that similar. So I think that we have less in common than you would maybe think. Like we say, there's a fiction industry, but there's no poetry industry. So the way that the two forms manifest in the world is a little bit different. He and his friends share work immediately, almost as soon as they're finished the last word of the poem, they're saying it out loud to one another. My fiction friends and I never share work. We rarely leave the house. We don't, we're hermits. That said, I know plenty of hermit poets as well, and very social fiction writers. But, so yes, to answer the question that you actually asked, we do share work. He is better at reading my fiction than I am reading his poetry, by far. So I don't as much comment on his. He's also a New York school-style poet, so it's a lot of sounds and associative logic that I quite honestly don't feel confident commenting on. I just say, that sounds great. That sounds really, really good. So.
Yeah, quite similar. We share work with each other pretty regularly. We'll have a day where we're both writing, at the end of the day, each of us will read each other's work. She is a better reader for me than I probably am for her. And but I think it's a real fortune though to have somebody who's so attentive to the rhythm of my language, to its potential musicality, in a way that I am not so much. I think it's. I wonder if it would be as easy if she was a fiction writer. I don't think it would be. I think there's enough difference and dissonance in what we do that it makes it easy for us to be very much enmeshed into each other's work and sharing. Yeah, but I try to read poetry as well. I make it a point these days to read more poetry than I probably otherwise would, and I find it energizing for me too. Yeah, but I think it's, you know, I haven't made a financial decision in marriage, and I don't think she did either. So, but artistically, it's working out so far.
I do have plenty of other questions here, but I want to throw it out to the audience and see if there's questions here first before I pull mine. Please.
You were saying after your book launch that you lost your scholar, the girl that knew Andrew, you got the character right. I'm just wondering, did you get the elephant right?
Sorry, it's actually, I kind of abbreviated that story a little bit. What was uncanny about that book launch was not only was the daughter of the ambassador there with photographs of herself and the princess, this guy who runs the port in Cochin in the south of India turned up at the event with pictures of the elephant being shipped from onto the boat. And I had actually completely made up the fact that this elephant had left from Cochin. I just guessed. I didn't actually know that it had. But in fact it had. You have to read the story to learn more about the elephant. It's not the happiest ending. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I enjoyed about writing the story was that I did write about the elephant in detail in a way that wasn't making the grand claim of knowing the elephant of getting into the psychology of the elephant. So yeah, do have a read if you can, and because I can't claim that I know the elephant either.
But I'd like to add that of all the short stories of elephants that I've read, those are the most convincing psychological portrait of an elephant.
I'll take that.
No question.
What's the biggest mistake you made early in your career?
I'm trying to think of what I did right in the beginning of my career. What was the smallest mistake that I made? I'm probably going to think of the perfect answer as soon as we are finished here, but the thing that springs to mind immediately is a newbie mistake, which is sending work out too early. I sent to an agent who I admired greatly, who represented a lot of surrealists who I adored, and I sent my notebooks to them way, way early. And the sad part of that, and now I tell emerging writers and my students this, is that you don't get a second chance with agents, so you have to stave off that impatient tendency to wait and wait until it's perfect and polished. And I didn't do that. That's one of many mistakes I made.
Gosh, I still feel like it's quite early for me, so it's presumptuous to even think about a mistake. I would, honestly, I think I could have done all of this sooner than I did. I'm very happy to be where I am right now, but there's so much time that I spend not writing. Because sometimes it's the easiest thing to do is not to write. That if I had been more disciplined, if I had tried to instill in myself habits of discipline, I probably would have produced more than I have already. In terms of regrets, that's probably the biggest regret I have.
So you got both sides of that answer. Wait a long time, and then don't wait. Just set it up right now.
I don't mean necessarily extending stuff out in publication. I just mean actually, flexing that muscle, writing every day, as much as you. I mean, obviously we all have other stuff often that pays the bills, but just to keep yourself in the habits of writing. That to me, I think I could have done from an early age than I did.
Actually, not bringing a question, Marie, I read somewhere that your story novel, which features Bob Dylan, as I mentioned in the introduction, got rejected 36 times
was published.
How did you kind of keep your belief in the story? And generally, how do you handle rejection? What does it mean?
I think that rejection, like death, is just a part of the process. It's not the end of the process, it's just a part of the process, and you have to make friends with it and let it live with you. And I have thought of this before, I've been asked this before. You have had so much rejection, why did you continue? And I've always known that I wanted to be a writer. And I just had this unreasonable, unbiddable, irrational moxie. And so Northup was rejected 36 times, but the title story, Save the Houses, was rejected over 50 times. And I think all that really says is that, A, I will never recoup the postage of ever, no matter what I win in my life. I will never get that postage back. And B, that I sent to the next magazine after I was rejected. And it's just because I just always wanted to be a writer. And I also thought that a writer was someone who gets rejected a lot. And it wasn't the rejection from literary magazines that used to get me down, although sometimes it would get me down. It was the other kind of rejections that they don't talk about as much that would actually be more of a problem, like the internal rejection when it's on Wednesday afternoon when you think you're the worst writer in the world. Or when you're at a party with friends or old friends or family members and they ask what you're working on and are you done that novel yet? And you say, oh, I'm working on a story collection about aliens. And they, politely excuse themselves to go talk to someone who actually makes a whit of sense. It's that kind of thing that actually was a little more difficult. Literary magazine rejection was easy.
Well, on that positive note. No, and I think it's something that writers need to be more honest about it, admit about rejection and failure, and also that you get through it and you do it. And you write the books, and you come here and talk about it to an attentive and beautiful audience. So thank you very much for staying.
Oh, so, sorry, just one thing was, we were talking about this before actually. Rejection is also something you deal with after you're published, and after you've won stuff, and after it's part of the, you get hung up on reading your Amazon reviews, your Goodreads reviews. It's inbuilt in the process of being in public, and having your work out there. So it's just part of the honor you have to build. You have to just be practiced and used to it.